Hello, we're back for our last, but certainly not least important session on this whole important topic of Ukraine's economic transformation. I feel like, Alexa, you two don't really need much of a introduction. Anybody who's working in Ukraine certainly knows about the tremendous work that you've done over these decades, including, of course, working with Ukraine House in Davos. But I think for today, it's important to note that you are the deputy chairwoman of the supervisory board of UkraineInvest. And as I said before, it's truly been invigorating to me to see the kind of exciting work that you have done and are doing with UkraineInvest. So I turn over the floor, Alexa, to you.
Thank you very much, Nadia, to you and to US Ukraine Foundation, and Serhi, to you and to UkraineInvest for organizing this week's important and timely events. Thank you for that thoughtful and kind introduction. I appreciate it. Our panel today is focused on cultivating foreign investment in Ukraine, on global outreach, on image building on the international stage. And we are very lucky to have a strong mix of international experts here in the panel with us today who are doing just that Ukraine promotion work. They come from the EU, from the Black Sea region, from North America, and from Ukraine itself. It's my honor and sincere pleasure to introduce them to you. First off, we have Ms. Emma Touros. Emma is Managing Director of the Canada-Ukraine Chamber of Commerce. It was founded in 1992, and it has, at current count, I think about 230 members. Next up is Mr. Burak Pehlivan. He is Chairman of the Board of the International Turkish-Ukrainian Business Association. He has led that organization since 2016, overseeing its so-called golden age, and they represent 95% of Turkish capital in Ukraine today. Next, we have Mr. Alexander Marcus. Alexander is chairman of the board of the German-Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Alexander is also full-time in Kiev, and he's tasked with promoting German-Ukrainian bilateral trade projects and supporting German investors in Ukraine. Founded in 1993, the chamber has over 170 members. Next up, we have Mr. Nicholas Timoshchuk. Nicholas is CEO of UFuture. UFuture is a Ukrainian holding company with assets in real estate, renewables, pharma, and IT. The combined market capitalization of your portfolio companies, I think, is close to $1 billion US, Nicholas. And Nicholas, in addition to his high-powered day job, is a talented musician, and he's currently writing a best-selling thriller novel based around a Ukrainian protagonist, which I'm sure will further Ukraine's image building on the international stage. I've promised the Washington book launch, and I look forward to reading the book, Nicholas. Last, but definitely not least, we have Mr. Bertrand Berrier. He's president of the CCI France in Ukraine, the French Chamber of Commerce in Ukraine. They count among their members Air France, L'Oréal, Peugeot, Renault, LVMH, and others. It is my sincere pleasure to be with you all today. We're going to have an interesting discussion. I'd like to dive right in with Burak, but first, to set the tone for our discussion on global outreach and Ukraine image building on the international stage, let's take a look at this short 2-minute video that we created and launched at Ukraine House in Davos last year. Oksana, thank you for rolling the tape. Burak, let's dive right in with you first. The International Turkish-Ukrainian Business Association in 2018 and 2019 was voted the best Turkish business association abroad. Turkey in 2020 became the largest foreign investor in Ukraine. It has invested a total of 4.2 billion US dollars in the country. Your strategy is working. So tell us more about that strategy and its stakeholders and how it powers Turkey's success stories in Ukraine.
Thank you very much, Alexa. I wish you, all my colleagues and audience, a wonderful panel. The facts that you mentioned are above all the result of excellent relations between Turkey and Ukraine and ongoing structural reforms in Ukraine. There are 700 Turkish companies work in Ukraine, and that companies represent more than 4.2 billion US dollars Turkish investment in the country. In 2020, as you mentioned, Turkey has become the largest foreign investor in the country. And Turkish companies not only focus on big cities as Kiev, we see in the regions many Turkish investments and many Turkish companies. And as a result of that, we have representative offices as the Turkish-Ukrainian Business Association in southern Ukraine in Zaporozhye, Kherson, and Odessa, in eastern Ukraine in Kharkiv, in central Ukraine in Vinnytsia, and our western Ukraine branch is located in Lviv. So we cover the country from west to east and from south to north. Turkish businesses, unlike in many other countries, are not only successful in the markets in such traditional sectors as textile, construction, or food processing. We have seen almost every part of Ukrainian economy, some Turkish companies. And from shoe care products to shaving gel, from cosmetics to machinery, at least in 10 sectors, we see market leaders among Turkish investors. Turkish airline companies and Ukrainian airline companies realize per week more than 200 regular flights. It means every day between Turkey and Ukraine, 30 flights. Averagely, I don't mention the charter flights, only regular flights. So the country is very accessible for Turkish businesses. Although there was coronavirus quarantines in 2020, we only observed one single digit decrease of foreign trade between two countries. And even there is such a low base effect, the foreign trade between Turkey and Ukraine in the first 10 months of that year is 59% when we compare last year in the same period. And Ukraine export to Turkey is more than 62% in that period. So there's a real great relations in investment, in trade, and I should mention in tourism too. For Ukrainian citizens, Turkey became the most favorite country to visit last year, and for Turkish citizens, again, Ukraine became the most favorite country to come. 150,000 Turkish citizens came to Ukraine. So when we look all this picture, the big picture, we see not individual successes and a systematic success of environment between two countries. First of all, we are neighbors. As you mentioned, we are in the Black Sea Basin. We locate Moldavia, with Moldavia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey has already passport-free visit possibility. So Turkish citizens and Ukrainian citizens can go without international passports to each other. Secondly, as I mentioned, there are such many flights. And the most important thing, deed speaks better than words. I speak, of course, Turkish better than English, and I am not very bad orator in Turkish language. But even I have such talents, let's say, if the product is not very good, I cannot sell it. The Turkish companies who wants to enter the Ukrainian markets, firstly look the current companies. And when you look, 700 Turkish companies, mostly very successful work in Ukraine. and very diversified sectors in many others, in many different regions, in manufacturing, in services, in IT. And when they look the success stories of that companies, and when they hear really very small number of the compliance, I don't mean there are not compliance, so it speaks better than our words for them. I can speak, or you can speak, everybody can speak about negative agenda in Ukraine, hours, weeks, months, about the sometimes deteriorating situations, sometimes increasing situations related to rule of law or corruption or geopolitical risks. We can speak about it. But for Turkish businesses, we mostly focus on the positive agenda. Because enough people or enough institutions speaks about negative things. We are not naive, of course. We know the problems in the country. But there is no country in the world that doesn't have any problems. We had very clever, very visionary prime minister in the 80s in Turkey. He has a word or sentence. He says, if a country has more American investors, American companies, that country will be more stable, more corruption-free, and more investment-suitable country. Why? Because all these foreign investors try to make this country better and better. So it's a like story from which is chicken is from egg or egg is from chicken. So when we see more international companies, more multinationals in Ukraine markets, more foreign investors invest in Ukraine, that countries try to make the business environment in the country better and better. They try to stimulate the structure reforms. They try to make rule of law better in the country, and they try to fight against the corruption. So our main message is always to think more this positive agenda and look to ongoing companies, to success stories, and if needed, help the reform process, structural reform process in the country. And one of the important things is to cooperate with our international colleagues, it says today, under the umbrella of International Council of Business Association Chambers in Ukraine. That institution, that mechanisms has given us over the recent 4 years, big motivation, big inspiration to have such a mechanism to share our problems, our experiences, or advices with our colleagues, with our peers. Thank you very much, Alexei. Thank you very much.
Well, you have led some big success stories in recent years. Thank you for your service. I'd like to go next to Alexander. Alexander, how do German investors view Ukraine as an investment location, and what sectors appeal most to German investors? What does Ukraine offer to them that other countries in the region do not?
Thank you very much for inviting me today. I'm Alexander Marcus, and what we actually see, we see transformation process. And if you allow, I would like to share a single slide about this transformation process. Can you see it?
We see that you've started screen sharing.
Yes.
There we go. Yes, we do. Thank you.
Yes, this is a slide which was developed by the former president of our chamber, Andreas Lehr from BASF, a big chemical company, and they saw these both groups. The first one, energy intensive and or Russian dependent industries, chemicals, refining, metals, machinery, transport equipment, automotive, manufacturing, mining. The second one, it's light industry with less dependence on energy. And there we have agriculture, food, feed, construction, consumer goods, automotive components. And I already stopped sharing here. And that is actually a very good picture of what German companies saw. When I came here in 2012 or 11, the foreign exchange between Germany and Ukraine was 30% in steel, raw material, 30% steel, 25% agriculture. Today, it's round about 10% steel, and it's 30% automotive component. And that is also what we see today, because we saw companies coming in 15 years ago into Ukraine for actually for manufacturing in Ukraine. And not very many people know that already today, 30,000 people workplaces have been created by the German automotive component industries. And the interesting thing is that those companies, they don't tell the Ukraine story because they don't want to enter competitors enter the country. They say, no, Ukraine is very bad. Don't go there. It's corrupt. Don't go there. But at the same time, they are opening the second or the third plant here in Ukraine. And this is one topic. The second topic is what we see, and that we see at actually the last 2 years during the time of the pandemic, it's nearshoring. So we see more and more German companies that have production sites in Far East, in Indonesia, China. They don't give them up, but they want to have alternatives at an EU border. And there, Ukraine is an ideal candidate. And we have a lot of inquiries today where we are assisting German companies that are actually looking for sites, for production sites in Ukraine, but it's almost 100% its production for export from Ukraine. Due to the fact that the purchasing power in Ukraine is still not so high, and Germany is mostly producing very expensive goods, we hope that in the future we will have more consumer good producers that are actually then already ready to sell in Ukraine. But at the moment, it's most of it is actually about coming to Ukraine, exporting, manufacturing here, and then exporting the goods to the European Union or to any other markets.
Interesting. I'm glad to hear you focus on the manufacturing, because Ukraine is an overnight truck drive to the EU retail outlet. It's perfectly positioned geographically. Nicholas, I'd like to go to you next. You Future, as I mentioned, is a Ukrainian holding company with assets in real estate, renewables, IT, infrastructure, pharma, including best-in-class innovation parks and industrial parks across Ukraine. The combined market capitalization of your portfolio companies is almost $1 billion US. You also do significant impact investing with your coding schools, your IT universities, your school for small and medium-sized entrepreneurs, among your many other projects. So tell us, how does we're talking today about image building and global outreach. How does your You Future story, your company narrative, help translate into your success? And how does your story help attract investors?
Thank you, Alexa. Well, first of all, thank you for such a flattering introduction in general. And first of all, for all the great work you personally have been doing for Ukraine. Really, as a Ukrainian, I cannot appreciate that enough. And by the way, I didn't have a chance to say it in person, but special thanks to Nadia McConnell, who introduced us all. I met Nadia back in 2011 when, believe it or not, I was working for British-Russian oil giant TNK-BP. And this company, as strange as it may sound, was one of the main sponsors of Ukraine's independence celebration, 20th anniversary in 2011 in DC. Wow. So my heart goes to Nadia for all that she has done also for Ukraine and for promoting our country. Now, coming back to your question, if we put it simply, we as You Future, as investors, be it in business or in impact, focus on anything that creates value in Ukraine. And what creates value in Ukraine is actually very attractive, both for international investors and brings undeniable benefits to our country. This is why we are now focused on developing, for example, our innovation parks like Unit City, but we also build similar parks in Kharkiv and in Lviv, because those are the platforms to bring and develop and nurture Ukrainian innovation ecosystem, startups, big corporates that do innovation, IT and tech companies that are booming in Ukraine, as you know, and already supporting a sizable, I would say, portion of the global digitalization and innovation. And this is why we also invested in IT, and it has been so far a success story for us, and we're planning to do a roll-up of that investment. And by the way, we are bringing in American investors with this industry. And by the way, I cannot speak about it right now because I'm under NDA, but we are going to announce partnership with big, major American technology companies with Unit City, which again demonstrates that this strategy of value creation, both for Ukraine and for international investors and companies in Ukraine, does work. And of course, renewable energy has been also a quite significant business for us. With this industry, with developing business in this industry, the future brought two major international investors in Ukraine. First, the Spanish Acciona back in 2017 or 18, if I'm not mistaken. And second is Qatari Nebras Power that, believe it or not, landed a major deal with us and become our partners in Ukraine in 2020 during the COVID year. And apart from that, we're also invested heavily in biotechnology. And currently we co-own a company called Biopharma. It's a very, very niche company, a producer of blood plasma derived medicines that is already exporting to 40 countries in the world. And because a consolidation is taking place in this industry, the chances are very high that we're going to be in top 10 companies from this industry globally. So as you can see, all this approach has been working. And of course, we have legacy industries like real estate, for example, infrastructure. We own and operate the second biggest international airport in Ukraine, aka Zhylyani, Kyiv International Airport. And we also develop industrial parks in Ukraine, even though we started it 6 years ago, way before there have been any incentives or any special regulation for such parks in Ukraine. And our industrial park in Bila Tserkva is almost full now. But apart from that, we're now looking at different projects in food and components production, because again, it builds on Ukraine natural resource base that we have, but is focused on creating value, going down the value chain and extracting maximum added value in Ukraine and exporting high added value products all around the globe. I personally believe that Ukraine, apart from many investors, need more US investment for a number of reasons, for financial reasons, for technology reasons, for political reasons. And I hope very much that on the one hand, the US government provides more strong political support to Ukraine. And on the other hand, doesn't politicize business in Ukraine that much, if you see what I mean. Because I have been working for major international companies, including American companies like Chevron. Now I'm a CEO of a major Ukrainian group. And I can tell you that, unfortunately, very often, American government politicizes, especially Ukrainian business in Ukraine, or at the same time doesn't provide enough of political support, especially in the times when our country needs it. So I hope this situation flips, and we as Ukrainian business ready to do everything in our powers to help that make it happen.
Thank you, Nicholas. And I love this biopharma story. I'm so glad you brought it up. And now the challenge is how to communicate this success story accordingly.
By the way, just about one thing I forgot to mention about biopharma. Sorry for chiming in. Before 2019, biopharma was actually two businesses: blood plasma derived medicines and generic medicines. And we sold our generic division to German Stada. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because it was the second exit in Ukrainian pharmaceutical industry to an international player over the entire independence of our country. So once again, these success stories do happen in Ukraine, including those with major international investors.
Bertrand, I'd like to go to you next. France is a top example of government-to-government agreements and cooperation. And just yesterday, France and Ukraine signed a contract to build 5 more patrol boats, for example, in Mykolaiv, which is part of a larger 137 million euro French-financed deal. Tell us about that support and those projects, and what has been the feedback from both countries to date?
Thank you, Alexa. Maybe I would just say a word about French presence in Ukraine so far. So basically, we at the Chamber, we represent about 160 French companies in Ukraine. French investment covers in Ukraine a variety of sectors, from financial institutions to production area to the distribution of goods, of cars, luxury goods, cosmetic products, to infrastructure. Indeed, and I do agree with what has been said previously by Alexander and Burak on the fact that what we see is that the overall impression of investors already in the country, and that's quite important to say, I think, is that the overall impression is that the business present here in Ukraine is quite satisfied with the situation over the past years, and despite the situation of the COVID, has known or has rather been little impacted in the Ukraine, and so the business remains good in Ukraine for those who have invested. As to your question, the relation between France and Ukraine on intergovernmental agreements, indeed, this has been something that has been launched and started about 4 years ago, and has been basically resulting in the decision to enhance the relation between France and Ukraine and to do more on the bilateral level. There are currently 7 agreements that have been signed. One is relating to one is quite widely known, is a delivery of helicopters to Ukraine by a British company. You mentioned the one on the boats. There are 3 projects relating to infrastructure, designed specially to 2 of them in more on the conflict zone in close to Lugansk, and one in Mariupol, relating to water distribution and water, to basically to bring water and to the population. So basically here we see that France has decided on this project to bring what is the most difficult is to bring the financing to the Ukraine, and also with the idea to also show the technology knowledge of France, or capacity in big infrastructure projects for French companies to showcase our capacities and capabilities in the field. So that's basically the aim of it. That's what has been decided, and so far so good, I would say, and we hope it will continue this way.
Super. You mentioned, Bertrand, this water project in the conflict zone. We're all up to date on current events. How do you see this cooperation? What is your forecast? How do you see this cooperation developing in the future?
Well, one of the projects has started about 2 years ago. So feasibility studies have been done. We're now going to enter into the construction phase. It's based in Mariupol. This project will continue a way or another. And the one in Lugansk was just signed, or the agreement was signed in May. So negotiations are underway. And of course, the current situation might raise some question, but there is no, I guess here it's more a political decision than an economical decision to go there and say, we have to do something for these regions, and to continue investing and continue showing that these regions are important for Ukraine in terms of its borders and the respect of its borders.
Great. Emma, I'd like to ask you, can you talk about the work of the International Council of Business Associations and Chambers in Ukraine, of which you are a member, alongside many of our panelists today? Who was involved? Why was it started? What is the mission? And how do you achieve these ends? What results are you most proud of?
Thank you very much, dear Alexa, for mentioning of ICBAC, International Council of Business Associations and Chambers in Ukraine. So you know that Canada and the United States invested a lot in capacity building in Ukraine, yeah. So and just from our even last year experience, we worked with the most just influential Ukrainian state bodies like Ministry of Economic Development and Trade, Export Promotion Office, UkraineInvest, State Property Fund, National Bank of Ukraine, and so on. And of course, we all are here understand that no one is perfect. And working with business on one side and just with the state bodies, with the government on the other side, my colleagues and I understood that we have more in common than than different. Yeah, so we have similar, our businesses have similar problems. We have similar questions to our government. We have also our investors are asking us about just almost the same support. That's why in 2017, just few chambers joined us and are still planning to join. So now we have 10 bilateral chambers and also Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce and Industry joined together and formed International Council of Business Associations and Chambers. So and just let's say about our mission is improving the business and self-governance conditions in Ukraine. Of course, so this is about capacity building, yeah. Strengthening and deepening the level of business dialogue with the government of Ukraine. And we all understand that government of Ukraine will will meet with 10 chambers, while they haven't enough time to meet with one chamber one by one. Sometimes it's easier to arrange a general meeting then, because we have a sound voice for the government of Ukraine, and I'm really happy to see my colleagues here. Representing and protecting business interests of foreign and local investors in Ukraine. You know that we had uneasy times in 2020, and this year lots of issues with the green energy, where we have a lot of investors international. So we supported all the initiatives to protect this kind of investments. Also, our mission is assisting in development of a better business environment. We are working for the future, not for today or for tomorrow. So that's why we support UkraineInvest. That's why we support development of export promotion office. We understand that ECHO will be in 2 or 3 years. And creating proper conditions for further growth of Ukraine's economy. Of course, this is our mutual goal because success of each business is important, even a small one. You know, my favorite when we have Canadian investments in small vet cleaning, because today we speak a lot about our health. Yeah, but what about those who can speak? Yeah, about animals. So that's why it's very important when each chamber and each business invest in just Ukraine's future and international communication and dialogue. So this is just the main message about our ICBAC. And my greetings to other colleagues who couldn't join us. This is Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, British Ukrainian Chamber, who else? Austrian Ukrainian, Chinese Ukrainian, Swedish Ukrainian. So I'm sorry if I have forgotten just one or two chambers, but actually I'm really grateful to my colleagues for support, because we support each other. So, and just what the results we are proud of. Of course, just we have results every day. So, for instance, next few days I'm traveling to other country. So, and I have already support of the Turkish diaspora there. So, Mr. Burak has introduced me to his colleagues. So, I understand that I will be supported there. So, I think that the same with Germany, the same with France, and of course, if someone needs support from the Canadian side, we do our best to help them. Thank you very much, dear Alexa.
Emma, thank you. I'd like to make sure that we touch briefly upon the recent investment nanny law and its significance for attracting foreign investors. As we know, the law passed earlier this year offers state support worth up to 30% of investments for projects involving more than 20 million euros over a 5-year period. I know that UkraineInvest is currently assessing 27 preliminary inquiries with a total value of around $2 billion US. And more than 70%, interestingly, more than 70% of these projects focus on the manufacturing sector. So I'd like to ask our group, this is an open question directed towards anyone who's inspired to answer. What does this law mean for your constituents? What is the feedback?
So may I start first?
Please.
So because the first investment nanny was promised to Black Iron, which is Canadian project. So this is really very important, and this showcase will be a good sign for other Canadian and US investors, because you know this company is international. So we are waiting for our nanny.
Does anyone else have anything to add?
Alexa, till now, when a Turkish investor asks us what kind of incentives are to exit in Ukraine, I used to always answer that there is not such a word in Ukrainian language as incentive. So there used to be never any subsidies by the government for the investors, and at least we have got already that word incentive and government incentives in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a breakthrough. It's really a devolution for supporting in Ukraine investments. But again, it's important. Investment nannies are important, but the current investors' success or unsuccess, their problems or they don't have problems, are even more important in that case. But anyway, I applaud this incentive. So we can say now Ukraine has offered investors some incentives. It's very good, very breakthrough. Thank you.
I would like
Alexa,
to.
If I may interrupt, it's Sergi. I'm just with poor connection because I'm between meetings, but I can just talk. So briefly to talk about investment nannies law. So about Black Iron.
This is Sahid Sivkach, CEO of UkraineInvest. Thank you, Sahid.
So Emma, we provide support to Black Iron all the time, and they already have their nannies, so to call, for a long time, and other investors as well. But what currently is happening is that the secondary legislation needs to be updated in some parts in order to submit formal applications. We already have 2 applications that are ready 100% to submit, and also waiting for those updates. So as soon as this will be done, formal applications will follow. But all our 27 investors, they have been assigned with investment managers, and we are working with them 24/7 or as they get back to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Nanny sounds so good for us. So we used to use this.
But this is not about our support. This is about then assessment by the Ministry of Economy. This is about formal assessment. of this application. And then the final decision will be taken by government of Ukraine, because they will take a collegial decision. They will vote to sign special agreement. So that would be the most important part. Thank you.
Thank you, Serhiu.
Thank you.
In the minutes we have left, I'd like to do 2 quick lightning rounds with our panelists, and then maybe take a question or two from our audience. A quick answer from each panelist. First of all, continuing our theme of global outreach and Ukraine promotion, Berlin used as its tagline, Berlin, the startup city. Norway used Norway, powered by nature. What, in your opinion, should be Ukraine's story? Burak, let's start with you. Quick lightning round. You're on.
I think we can say for Ukraine, Ukraine is the exact place to invest, or Europe's land for opportunities, new opportunities. So such kind of slogan we can create for Ukraine. Really, that country offers many, many opportunities. Alexander Marcus very good mentioned that the current investors sometimes jealous to attract, to invite here new investors. So when people come, when investors will come, they can see with their eyes, with their soul, they can feel what kind of the opportunities Ukraine can offer them.
Thank you, Burak. Bertrand, you're next.
I mean, since we're looking for a slogan, I guess I'd be very short. If we are positioning ourselves as of today, I would say, and looking on what's happening on the market on our side, I would say Ukraine is IT and agro, because it's what we see where the investments, and that's where the money is.
Thank you, Bertrand. Emma.
You know, my country is very different in its regions and in terms of people. They have a different mindset, and I would like to wish my country, and maybe I'm not sure it can be a slogan, to find its unity in diversity.
Thank you, Emma. Nicholas.
Ukraine, value in every corner.
Great. Finally, Alexander.
Here it's very easy, because you know the breadboxes of Europe as one term, and that was at one time, but this is another story. This slogan was made by Germans too, but today it is the manufacturing hub of Europe.
Manufacturing hub. Interesting. So some diverse answers here. Ukraine, the exact place to invest. Ukraine, IT and agro. Ukraine, unity and diversity. Ukraine, value in every corner. And Ukraine, the manufacturing hub. Thank you for those comments. And before we go to 1 or 2 questions, I'd like to ask our panelists just briefly, what is the main message you would like to leave our audience with today? Nicholas, you go first.
Don't trust the news, trust your judgment, especially in respect to Ukraine.
Thank you. Bertrand. You are on mute.
Yeah, sorry. No, I quite agree. I guess it's important to I guess Ukraine needs to be looked at, and that's when we hear the news, especially in Europe and especially in France. It might be scary, or it might indeed it is quite scary, but it's always good to come here and meet the investors that are on the ground and have a second idea of what the reality is.
Thank you for contributing that. When my foreign friends come to Ukraine, the common refrain is, it confounded expectations. Emma.
Just, I would like to say that visit Ukraine at least once, visit Ukraine twice, and try to do something good with Ukraine. And
thank you.
Be healthy and happy.
Thank you, Emma. Alexander.
Come to Ukraine and look yourself.
Hearing some overlap here. Thank you for that, Barak.
Let's focus on positive agenda.
Super. Don't trust the news, trust your judgment, visit Ukraine. Thank you for this feedback, panelists. I'd like to just read out, we had a question from Tamara Denisenko. Nicholas Timashuk answered it very cogently. Tamara asked, what are the comparative wage and salary rates in Ukraine versus other countries in Eastern and Western Europe? And does that impact labor migration from Ukraine? And Nicholas Timashuk replies, Ukraine must stop being a cheap labor country. It's a tough and ungrateful racket. Instead, we must become a great value country. And on that note, I would like to, in our remaining minutes, open it up to our audience for some questions. You can use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen. Are there any questions from our audience? Any questions from our audience? You have a great opportunity here to engage with this truly international audience of stakeholders. Thank you all so much for your work, your promotion work, and we value your service. Thank you for being with us today. It's been an interesting discussion. And Nadia, I will at this point turn it over to you.
Thank you, Alexa. Thank you so much to this and the previous panels. For somebody who's worked in Ukraine for over 30 years, these kind of sessions kind of re-energize certainly me on a personal level, and I think our organization. Nicholas, you have, thank you for mentioning our event that we started in 2011. You know, we always had a business component to our events because we've always thought this was important to support, free market economy in Ukraine. But several years ago, I think 3 or so years ago, we really recognized that we needed to amp up our efforts to promote the business and economic ties that Ukraine has with other countries. You so rightly pointed out that it's important for so many reasons, but from a perspective here from Washington, we know that business and economic ties are a major factor of how countries relate to each other on a bilateral level, right? We only have to look at what's going on today. So we've been doing more in that area. And I think Alexa knows, and Nicholas too, we're a very small strategic do tank. And so this conference was not just about putting together these fantastic speakers like yourself to have a very motivating and important discussion. It is about, okay, what do we do next? What are any action items that we can take to promote the agenda that you all have set out? So I will be reaching out to all of you. I've already, let's say, have a partnership with UkraineInvest to perhaps engage more with us in that goal. You have so much to contribute. So look for some asks from us about engaging on this great important agenda. So again, thank you.
Nadia, if I may interrupt, we have Anders Aslan asking if he can make a brief closing comment.
Sure.
Anders, the floor is yours. Perhaps he needs a panelist link. There he is.
Yes, I think it's Nadia who was actually registered as Anders Aslund.
So does Anders, does he really want to Was there really a question for him or is that from me? Well, mentioning Anders, we've had this initiative, Friends of Ukraine network for many years, and Anders Oslin has been one of the key members along with Ed Chow on our economic security task force. And we are about to really strengthen that task force. And I see some potential members to join us in that effort. So I think that really was just me, not Anders. So thank you to this panel, to the previous panels, and there's much to be done, but there has been much that has been done, and we need to do a better job of communicating that. And I think it was Nicholas that said, don't believe the news. Yes, we have to do a better job of telling the true story of Ukraine and its development. In these, 30 years of independence is a major achievement, right? Ukraine was only independent in the past one period for several days and one period several years. So Ukraine is here to stay, and you all are a great part of that success of these past 30 years. So thank you, and do pobачення, and good night.